Grenfell as well, from my experience as housing minister. The IPA will also offer support to injured victims and their representatives. Second, Madam Deputy Speaker, the IPA will give victims where they have concerns about the engagement and the responsiveness of public authorities, whether it's the police, local authorities or the like, or where victims and bereaved want an investigation or an inquiry set up more swiftly to ensure maximum transparency. Third, the IPA will give a voice to the wider community, not just the direct, if you like, victims and bereaved, which have been affected most by the tragedy in question. And to achieve this, we'll set up a register of advocates from a range of different professions, backgrounds and geographical areas, including doctors, social workers, emergency workers, members of the clergy, people with media handling experience, because often that is another burden which they will not have experienced, and others. And so communities will be able to nominate an advocate to act on their behalf in order to express their particular concerns and ensure that their voice is heard as a community. Fourth, Madam Deputy Speaker, the IPA will be supported by full-time, permanent staff so that it can act very swiftly when a tragedy occurs and make sure the support is there for the victims, for the families, from day one. And critically in this regard, the IPA will be there to consult with and represent victims and their families before any inquiry is set up. So the IPA will be able to make representations on the type of inquiry, whether it's statutory or non-statutory, and other important functional issues, such as the data controller powers available to any inquiry and the relationship they may have with the IPA in the exercise of such functions. Fifth, the scope of the eye will be extended to cover events in England and Wales, but of course, mindful of the devolved settlements, we will work with all the devolved administrations to ensure our plans are coordinated with the support that's being offered outside of England and Wales. And finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, although the IPA is first and foremost about doing better by the victims and the survivors, I think it is also worth acknowledging that it will be in the wider interest of the public. It will ensure we achieve better relationship between public bodies, government and bereaved, that we get better, quicker answers and are able to learn and act on the lessons from such tragedies more decisively. I can tell the House that the preparatory work is now well underway to establish the IPA, and we will place it on a statutory footing as soon as is possible, and I'll say more about the legislative vehicle shortly. Now, of course, there have been other important reforms over recent years to support from enduring the same anguish in the future. The Hillsborough families have always maintained that their struggle for truth and justice for the 97 was of national significance. And I agree it's hard. And I also want to pay tribute to the families of those who died in Grenfell. Tribute to them for their dignified. their steadfast commitment to Hillsborough families, the granddaughters, the families and victims of the magistrate court to ensure that their statements are taken pay particular tribute to the Right Reverend James Jones, KBE, for his work on Hillsborough and his important report. I met with him last week. The government will be responding to the wider report this spring, and we know in our heads and in our hearts that there is still much more to do to heal the wounds from that horrendous and heartbreaking tragedy. But this is an important step forward. The IPA will make a real difference, and I commend the state to the House.
Shadow Secretary of State Steve Root.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I start by thanking the Secretary of State for the start of his statement. For decades, the Hillsborough families fought for justice. They fought for the truth about how 97 innocent children, women and men were unlawfully killed in wholly avoidable circumstances. They faced a cover-up by public authorities who hid the truth and blamed the victims. These brave families did more than seek justice for their loved ones. They sought to shine a light on what had gone so tragically wrong, because that's how we learn how not to make the same mistake again. But it should never have taken over 3 decades. I was in Sheffield on that fateful day in 1989, just a mile or so from Hillsborough, with a junior doctor friend who was called back to the hospital to treat the victims and deal with the aftermath. So I remember vividly the horror Today, I pay tribute to those families for their long struggle for justice, and to those who've spoken up, notably the Right Honourable Member for Garston and Halewood, the Honourable Member for Liverpool West Derby, the Right Honourable Today is a chance to balance the scales of justice and give those victims the voice they need. Proposals don't go far enough, and they will not be weak as they The public advocate needs to be a
BFM TV face à face. Apolline de Malherbe.